this is the first time we are not seeing chaos. And that's because today, for the first time, state and local officials allowed police to actually be involved in the crowd control with these protests. And that's what they did this morning, is they cleared out this crowd of hundreds of activists that included some paid agitators.
So this is an interesting story because the repeated Chicago ICE riots that we've seen basically every single weekend came to an abrupt end yesterday after the Broadview Chicago Police Department basically caved to President Trump, and local leaders in that area are now allowing the police to really do their jobs and crack down on the repeated left-wing riots. And that's certainly good news to be celebrated. However, on the other hand, when you look at how quickly and effectively this was all shut down the moment that police were finally allowed to do their jobs, it further does confirm your suspicion that we all had about places like Chicago up until this point, or especially Portland, Oregon, which is to say, in any case where you're seeing repeated left-wing rioting and social unrest, it's not a matter of the local government can't do anything about it. It's that they're making a conscious choice to allow it to happen. And that is not a good indictment of a place like Portland or many of these local Democrat leaders. And it does further prove Trump's point. Every time he talks about sending the National Guard or federalizing an area, well, after all, if there is an active abdication by the local government to stop violence or actually enforce the law on their own streets, and federal agents as a result are in danger of that, then you sit there and tell me that's not justified. That said, guys, in today's video, I want to bring you this full story on how, in a rather perhaps shocking or surprising reversal, suddenly, for whatever reasons we'll kind of speculate and discuss, yesterday the local Broadview area decided to allow police to actually stop enforcing their sanctuary city policy and start enforcing the real law. That immediately left-wing riots completely fell apart. It's really funny how that works. That said, guys, do us a favor before we get into it. Make sure you hit that like button down below and subscribe to the channel if you are new. Doing so is the best way to support our work and ensure that we can keep bringing you these videos. And that said, as a casual reminder, we've done several videos on this, but yes, this is the exact ICE facility where we've seen people get arrested carrying guns, doing who knows what they were intending, right, against the local ICE officials. This is, by the way, the same building where that one Democrat congressional candidate, I think her name is like Kat Ugabadu or something like that, keeps on making these political stunts. Like 2 weeks ago, she said she got body slammed by ICE because they told her to stop sitting in the road. She refused. They picked her up and moved her. She refused. She came back to sit down again, and then they picked her up again and then dropped her on the ground. They said, I got body slammed. Or, the other week, she was standing in front of a moving vehicle and then claimed that they were trying to run her over because all they were doing is, standing in front of a crosswalk, even though they were blocking the road. So these are the types of antics. And yes, we have seen cases of violence. We've seen some of these radical Antifa lunatics openly make death threats against the ICE agents. And it's been basically a recurring thing every single weekend and especially every single Friday. That said, yesterday started off looking as it usually does, right? Here you saw a scene at only 9 a.m. in the morning, ladies and gentlemen, where this many crazy, insane leftists had already showed up and they're getting in a shoving match with the law enforcement there. Yeah, so you basically get the idea. Right, the peaceful left. However, you may start to notice something different about this situation, which is that by my estimation, some of these people actually do not look like federal agents. They look like local law enforcement. Now, why is that significant? Well, because whenever federal agents are deployed to these areas, their jurisdiction is limited in scope for, constitutional or legal reasons. Now, I would argue that in the case where the local government, as we are proving here, just abdicates its duty, that it's sort of also a question of, okay, if the federal government goes down the street, who's really going to stop them? I don't know, just a genuine question I have. But, it is what it is, right? This is why it's been important, actually. It's kind of necessary, unless you want to federalize the city, that local law enforcement actually do go and step in. So we'll tell you what happened as a result in a second here. But I further want to show you the scene from early yesterday morning where the Border Patrol Commander Greg Bovino had to yell at left-wing militants outside of ICE and ordered them to disperse or face arrest And then guess what happens? They don't disperse, so some of them did indeed face arrest.
Look at him. He's doing his video. He's doing his video.
Move down the block. This is the zone we were allowed to protest in.
And of course, look at these completely peaceful protesters. Asked to disperse repeatedly, they don't do it. They start getting into shoving matches and then cry the victim when they got arrested. Ladies and gentlemen, that's left-wing protest culture for you. The issue that federal agents have been running into is, yes, they can arrest, they can force people to disperse from ICE facilities, but if you're basically blocking the road essentially outside, there's a jurisdiction issue. And we've seen that actually. ICE vehicles are trying to enter or exit the area, and then the protesters just block the road. And this is exactly why, right? Either you need to get permission from the local government to say, hey, federal agents, you have broader jurisdiction. Or the federal government needs to just do it anyway. That's a different conversation. But the easiest way to really make this happen is obviously that the local police simply do their jobs. You know, it is pretty standard police practice that whether there's a protest happening peaceful or not, you deploy law enforcement to make sure things get out of hand. But repeatedly, thanks to sanctuary city policies, these cities have basically abdicated. They've stood down and said, oh, if there's violence, whatever, that's not our problem because it's outside an ICE facility. Never mind the fact that actual residents of your own city are involved. Many times it's the residents of your city that are hurt, right? This is the situation in Portland, for instance, where they're not just rioting outside the ICE facility, they're just randomly assaulting local residents outside who are mad about the noise because they live in an apartment across the street, or they're attacking journalists on Portland city grounds, and of course nothing is done. But as we hinted at you in the beginning, the big news here, the big sea change, is that finally yesterday, Broadview Chicago police decided to actually get involved and crack down on the chaos and the violence and the pushing and the shoving and the death threats and everything we've seen now for several weeks. I will reiterate, I don't know exactly why this is. This could be because of Trump threatening to send federal troops into the city, and so it's kind of a saving of face. Hey, pretend like you're doing something. We did also previously cover, I think just a couple of days ago, how the Broadview police chief was really pissed off after ICE agents called him a coward, because there's literally video, the federal agents are pushing and shoving back with the protesters, and the Broadview police chief is just walking by like, do. So I don't know, maybe his ego was damaged and he actually decided, okay, now I'm going to do my job. Not sure, local leaders, something, the local residents are just pissed off with what's happening. I have no idea why you're seeing this change. But that said, it is certainly welcome news for whatever it was, and I'm sure it was thanks to some type of political pressure, whether that's ICE calling the police chief a coward or Trump or something like that. But take a look at this, because within hours of local police actually stepping in and doing their job, a situation that is usually noisy, chaotic, and violent every single weekend suddenly did a 180. As you can see here, just yesterday afternoon and evening, Broadview Chicago ICE Facility had gone silent because the police were allowed to do their jobs and arrest violent left-wing Antifa and paid rioters. And yes, exactly. Imagine that. When you actually make a conscious choice to allow law enforcement to do their job, it turns out you don't have to deal with left-wing and Antifa violence every single weekend, which then further verifies the fact that it is a conscious choice by local leaders to allow Antifa and left-wing violence every single weekend. In a sense, they are endorsing it, which is why I constantly use the word insurrection as of late, because this is something that was being allowed by the local government. But hey, I guess credit where it's due. We'll see how long it lasts, right? But apparently in Chicago, that is no longer the case. So take a listen.
Here, we have had huge crowds of protesters coming out every Friday for the past month. And this is the first time we are not seeing chaos. And that's because today, for the first time, state and local officials allowed police to actually be involved in the crowd control with these protests. And that's what they did this morning, is they cleared out this crowd of hundreds of activists that included some paid agitators, according to federal agents. We saw at least a dozen people taken into custody, and at least 5 are now facing charges, including 2 accused of attacking officers. Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem was here in Broadview at the ICE Processing Center this morning. You can see this video of her on the roof where a sniper's nest has been put up as the threats against ICE have increased after more than a month of often chaotic protest at this facility. Last night, though, despite not allowing local police to be involved in crowd control until today, Broadview's mayor argued ICE is completely to blame for the chaos.
When you see agents dispersing tear gas or chemical minutia or rubber pellets, what do you call it? You know, it's unacceptable. You know, we don't need to be policed. We know how to maintain.
The question from federal officials, though, is if you know how to police, why haven't you been doing it? And after more than a month of these chaotic protests, federal agents have been left on their own to deal with these huge crowds of hundreds of activists trying to keep ICE officers from bringing in the illegal aliens that they've arrested as part of Operation Midway Blitz. And the change you can see here tonight, it is just night and day from what we've been seeing over the past month. Joey?
Thanks, Garrett.
Yeah, so I have absolutely no clue what the anti-Trump Broadview mayor is even talking about. You claim you know how to police. Okay, why haven't you done it? But for whatever reason, she is now choosing to do it. I'm not sure. Does she think that's going to prove a point, apparently, against ICE and the federal government? Oh, look, see, we can arrest people without using tear gas. Yeah, you guys are the local police. You have more manpower. You have more jurisdiction. We don't have a problem with you coming. Like, we want the situation to be shut down. That's exactly what ICE has been asking you to do for an entire month. But thanks to your sanctuary city policy, you're just saying, oh, let the violence happen, right? Typical Chicago, by the way. Typical Democrat leadership in general, right? Let's just completely have police abdicate our duty, but then cry the victim when the federal government has to come in and treat us like babies and children and say, okay, I guess we're going to have to do your job for you. No, this is what we would prefer, right? We don't like sanctuary cities. It's not, people think that we have this like crazy far right fantasy of militarizing all the cities and doing martial law. It's like, no, that's expensive and complicated. No, we would much rather, right? We would much rather actually just be able to cooperate with local cities. That way ICE can do its real job, which is immigration enforcement, and you guys can do your job, which is local civil order, right? It's not that complicated. And again, look how quickly the whole thing was able to disperse the moment that local police simply were given the order, hey, actually police, actually do your job. What I'd further like to point out is, as usual, the insincerity and the astroturfed nature of many of these left-wing events, because you will also notice at the very moment where many of the paid rioters and agitators get arrested, the whole thing falls apart. So take a listen.
And Garrett, can you tell us a little bit more also about whether do you think it's is this protest growing throughout the day, or do you get the sense that because they've taken this action to clear things out that they'll start to just go on home?
Well, what we've seen in the past is that when there start to be these clashes, it spreads very quickly within these activist groups online, and that can be a magnet to have folks that are coming out here to support that, to be able to build these efforts to try and shut down Operation Midway Blitz. I do want to point out, within the last 10 minutes, we had several Border Patrol officers come up to us, and they pointed out several individuals in the crowd that they were calling out as paid agitators, saying that those are 2 individuals that they were telling folks that are out here to demonstrate peacefully, stay away from them if you want to avoid trouble, because they are out here to agitate and they will cause you trouble if you get caught up near them.
Just one last point, and we've got to go, so we'll make it quick. Garrett, Portland is very different from Broadview, Illinois.
Well, yes, it is very different because Antifa only has about, we'll say 50% influence over the local government in Broadview, Illinois. In Portland, it has 100%. Actually, some people were pointing out in my comment section recently that there are members sitting on the Portland City Council that are actually like Antifa leaders, which does not surprise me at all whatsoever. That said, last little nugget of information here I want to show you is the reaction of the local residents who, in many of these cases, right? You know, there's this belief, oh, we have the left-wingers have the mandate of the people, even though we lost the election. And, you know, everyone wants to see, they're all inspired by us protesting and showing resistance to Donald Trump. And everything in their eyes is like this LARP in their head that they're these 1960s civil rights activists or something like that. But in reality, as you could imagine, the people living in the area are annoyed that these noisy, violent protests and riots are breaking out down the street from their homes or places of work basically every single weekend, which is exactly why you see here some black Chicago residents going out and saying, quote, Daddy Trump said y'all gotta go, right? Black locals came down to the Broadview ICE facility on October 3rd to show support. I don't think it's necessarily just about Trump's deportations policy. It's about them being so happy that the protesters are finally stopping to be annoying and like just, you know, no longer causing a bunch of problems in the local community. So take a listen.
You know what? I'm Cuban.
They gotta go too.
No, that's all la mierda. That's all la mierda. Tornado me down. Can trace it. My God, can trace it. She just feel threatened. Baby, no, I am home.
Trump said go home. Trump said go home. Trump said go home. Daddy Trump said y'all gotta go.
Come on now.
If you don't like my people, get the out of here. It's real simple. Real simple. You don't like my people? Get the out of here. It's real simple. We're never going away, motherfucker. Tens of thousands of years, we're never going away. You can never get rid of a native. You can never get rid of a native. You ain't got no land.
You ain't white. You ain't
You ain't got no land. You ain't got no land.
Y'all ain't got no land. I love this guy so much. What a patriot. But all of that in mind, okay, we're now going back to the central point. This incident, this very quick dispersal of the crowd and mass arrests made by the local police, stands as more evidence that if there's repeated anti-ICE riots and violence going on in a city, again, that is a conscious choice of the left-wing local political leadership. So to me, there needs to be an ultimatum, right, made to a city like Portland, for instance, where, okay, so you have 1 week, you should have 24 hours, frankly, to start using the Portland police to crack down. And if not, we are going to make the definitive conclusion, which I think we've already proven, but if you want to put it on the record, right, that the Portland government is an open insurrection against the federal government. They are sponsoring left-wing terroristic violence against the federal government, and we're going to invoke the Insurrection Act and do what needs to be done, right? That's the way I see it. Because, again, this is such solid proof it's not really that hard if you have the political will. So why don't they have the political will? Because the local leaders are working in cahoots with the very people that you've recently designated to be a domestic terrorist organization. So, there you go. All right, with all of that said, guys, let me know your thoughts on this situation in the comment section down below. Be sure to leave a like on this video, subscribe to the channel if you are new, and until next time, God bless and peace. Update today. Apparently, this is the scene as of today. So clearly, local law enforcement have set up these designated protest barriers. I assume if you go outside of them, you're going to be arrested for obstructing or blocking the road. And then noticeably, I mean, just look at how much these protests have dwindled down and frankly become absolutely pathetic. This is the scene right now, so.
Can you walk faster? Hurry up. That's all you got?
Pathetic. Pathetic.
You remember my voice, huh?
Isn't that so funny? You arrest... hold on. I want to make a point about this. Okay, I don't know. He's screaming whatever nonsense. Screaming into the void. Like, nobody's even there. Nobody's even listening. But notice when you arrest the paid adjutants and you arrest the violent ones, how little people are actually left. Oh, that's interesting. It's interesting that for an allegedly peaceful protest, when local police, Democrat police in a Democrat city, arrest people who are getting violent, it's like nobody left, because it's almost like all of these people are coming here to agitate, and they're perfectly fine with causing chaos if not causing violence, huh? What a pathetic scene, right? You just remove the paid protests or remove the violent ones, and the left has nothing. Because guess what? These crowds that show up that are not even that big to begin with, but still, you mean to tell me a lot of it is astroturfed? A lot of it is paid? A lot of it's coming from, organized militants, and this is not just the ordinary uprising of the citizens in Chicago? Yeah, big surprise, guys. But anyways, just wanted to show you that. That said, see you later. Peace.